Rama and welcome to my art space. One of the tools an artist uses is the palette. So the palette is a board or a surface working area that is used to mix the paint on. So there's a plastic palette and a wooden palette, but do you know that there's also a paper palette? So stick with me as I review one of these disposable palettes that I have discovered. One of the most commonly used palette is the wooden palette. That's the one with a hole in the middle to place the thumb on. But the one that I'm using is this plastic palette, which is the cheapest in the market. This one is unlike the wooden palette because it has 10 different sections where you can put in the paint separately. And then there's this middle section where you can mix the paints. I've been using this one for years. It's a decent kind of palette, but it's hard to clean, especially if the paint has been hardened on it. So I'd like to try other kinds of palette to see which ones would be better for me. When I heard about the paper palette, I thought it's interesting to try it out. So I found this Phoenix Stir Up paper palette, which I bought from the oil paint store in Cubao. This palette, which is bigger than my old one, measures 9 by 12 inches. It consists of 38 sheets, and each thin sheet has a smooth surface similar to that of wax paper. It's designed much like the traditional palette because it has a hole where the thumb can be placed in. This costs only 231 pesos or $4.38. So it says here that this palette can accommodate all kinds of mediums. So I want to try it out with two of the mediums that I usually use: oil paints and watercolor. Okay, so I'm gonna first try the palette with an oil painting. This time the video will not focus too much on the process of the painting, but I will just show how the palette will be used and how well it will serve me. I'll first put on the palette the colors that I'll be using in this painting, including yellow and blue. And then I will mix the yellow and the blue to create green. I tried to mix the paints as gently as I can because I didn't want the palette knife to make a scratch on the surface of the palette, especially that it's too thin. I can also mix the paints on the palette with the use of a brush. My subject, by the way, is this little plant. Plants, by the way, are one of the easiest still life subjects for painting. I find that the space of the palette is wide enough to accommodate more colors. I can also create different tones and shadows in the palette. One of the things I like about this palette is that its smooth surface is easy to mix colors on. I think the palette's smooth surface is also a factor to keep the paints viscous even though it's sitting there on the surface for quite some time. As I've said, the area of the palette is wide enough that it would let even the bottle of my mineral spirit sit there. Now, I find the paper palette very convenient because it's less messy. It's easy to tear up and clean up after you finish your painting. But the problem with this, I think, is that because it's so thin, I did not notice that I also tore up the next page with it. So if I haven't noticed that, I would have wasted another sheet. So what I did is that I folded the unused sheet even though it was quite soiled because it touched the paint in the other palette that I've used. And well, I was thinking of using this for outdoors. So that's on my next test. We're now on our second and final test, which is watercolor. So instead of taking out that whole palette, I only took out that one sheet that I accidentally tore with the other one the other day. And as you see, the paint that has stuck on the sheet has already dried off after one day. Even though the sheet has been folded, I think it can still be used as a palette. But I just have to put some weight on so that it will not fly out when the wind blows. To paint this bottle of perfume, I need to place on the palette the pigments that I think I might need for the picture. Since I'm having trouble with pink, I need to test out two colors before I start. With the use of a palette knife, I mix permanent red and white to see if this would make the pink that I need. Purple mixed with white is also a good candidate for pink. It's nice that the palette paper is not being torn up while mixing thick pigments on the surface. I think the best candidate for this baby pink bottle is the red and white mixture. I just need to add a little more white to make it more lighter. One of the good things I find in this paper palette is that the paint does not seep through the paper even though it's so thin. With this, I can just mix on colors through and through. What I don't like about watercolor though is that it has the tendency to be cakey, especially if you're adding a thick layer over an already dried layer. Also, watercolor has the tendency to dry up quickly even when left for a moment. It can still be reactivated with water though. There's still more space on the palette to add up more colors. Even this has dried up a lot, but they can still work when dampened with water. I'd say the palette has been good in handling all kinds of paint mediums. Some of the good points that I find in this palette is that you can carry it anywhere and you can have it when you are painting during your travels. Also, it's easy to dispose and as I've said, you can easily clean up after you paint. However, some of the things that I'm concerned of about this paper palette is that I don't know if this would break down easily in the landfill. I think its material is similar to wax paper, so I'm not sure if it will break down easily. And also, when you used up all the sheets, you need to buy again. So you would need to spend more money on that. So far so good. When it comes to convenience, I give it 5 stars over 5. But when it comes to ESG concerns, I think I'll give it 3 stars over 5. And that ends my review on the paper palette. I hope you learned something new from this. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And I hope to see you again here in my art space. Bye! So one of the tools an artist uses is the palette. So the palette. So okay, I think the shoot must go on even though there's silly music playing in the background. I wish I got a remote. Psh, psh, psh.